Hello, good evening, happy Friday. Yeah, merry everything and happy always. This was a gift for my mom last year or the year before. I love it. I still love it. So, yeah, welcome everyone. Today we are getting back into The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall, also known as the Masonic, Hermetic, Qabbalistic, and Rosicrucian Symbolical Philosophy. Encyclopedic Symbolical Philosophy. Okay. There we go. And today we are getting into Atlantis and the Gods of Antiquity. On page 33, XXXIII. All right. I got to pull up my Nexigo focus thing so I can show you this picture. I got clean fingers and let's do it to it. So this first picture is entitled Odin, the Scandinavian father god. Oh, shoot. I don't know what that was. Boom. Hey, I don't even think I'm going to mess with the... Ooh, some funky eyes in those animals there. Are they wolves? Are they dogs? I bet they're wolves. Let's find out. Ooh, the Rainbow Bridge. Okay, let's read about it. I'm trying to... Okay. It says, it is difficult to secure any satisfactory information concerning the identity of Odin. If he actually founded the mysteries of Scandinavia, he was undoubtedly an initiate of an Eastern school, possibly the Buddhistic. The etymology of the word Odin shows its various forms as Woden, Wodan, Wotan, Wutan, and Odin, Odin. These words are now generally defined as meaning wood or wind. On this subject, that indefatigable. Hey, Simon, welcome in. Indefatigable. The indefatigable worker, which I understand, but I've never put it together. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Godfrey Higgins has made several important discoveries. He writes, thus it appears that Woden, the northern god, is simply the Tamulic method, Tamulic, the Tamulic method of pronouncing Buddha. Sir William Jones also believed that Buddha was Woden. That Woden came from the north, not the south, of India, cannot be doubted. The Tamils, or Tamils, are a branch of the Dravidian race. They are now scattered through southern India and Ceylon. Cinnamon. It is peculiarly significant that Woden should be linked through his name with the ancient source of Aryan culture in northern India. Higgins further says, quote, in the Syriac tongue, Odin is Adonis, but the O in Syriac or Pushto, which we have found is the same as Tamul, was the emphatic article the, T-H-E, in caps. Then Odin would be the din, dun, or dawn. But dawn, we have found, meant wisdom or knowledge. Thus we come again to the tree of knowledge, or the garden of knowledge, or garden of Adonis, end quote. See anacalypsis. That's in parentheses. As Woden therefore means both wood and wisdom, it does not require a great stretch of the imagination to see in this symbolic name an allusion to the tree of knowledge growing in O-Dawn, the dawn, or Eden, the garden of wisdom. Boom. Cool. Okay, now, Atlantis and the Gods of Antiquity. And this picture here the scheme of the universe according to the Greeks and Romans. This is a bit like the picture that I have posted for my thumbnail for this. AF, big hugs! I'll show it to you. And this one I will, I think, zoom in. Boom. It's similar. And the scheme of the universe according to the Greeks and Romans. Okay, let's get this zoom back down. Zoop-a-doop, boop, boop. That looks good. Okie doke. Atlantis is the subject of a short but important article appearing in the annual report, The Board of Regents of the Smithsonian Institution of the year ending June 30th, 1915. The author, M. Pierce Termier, a member of the Academy of Sciences and Director of Service of the Geologic Chart of France in 1912, delivered a lecture on the Atlantean hypothesis before the Institute, which is spelled weirdly, before the Institute Oceanographique. Oh, it's in a different language. Okay, before the Institute Oceanographique. Okay, let's try again. Oceanographique. It is the translated notes of this remarkable lecture that are published in the Smithsonian report. Quote, after a long period of disdainful indifference, writes M. Termier, observe how in the last few years science is returning to the study of Atlantis. How many naturalists, geologists, zoologists, or botanists are asking one another today whether Plato has not transmitted to us, with slight amplification, a page from the actual history of mankind. No affirmation is yet permissible, but it seems more and more evident that a vast region, continental or made up of great islands, has collapsed west of the Pillars of Hercules, otherwise called the Strait of Gibraltar, and that its collapse occurred in the not far distant past. In any event, the question of Atlantis is placed anew before men of science, and since I do not believe that it can ever be solved without the aid of oceanography, I have thought it natural to discuss it here, in this temple of maritime science, and to call to such a problem, long scorned but now being revived, the attention of oceanographers, as well as the attention of those who, though immersed in the tumult of cities, lend an ear to the distant murmur of the sea. End quote. Emoji King, welcome. Hey, everybody, welcome in. In his lecture, M. Termier presents geologic, geographic, and zoologic data that are data in substantiation of the Atlantis theory. Figuratively, draining the entire bed of the Atlantic Ocean, he considers the inequalities of its basin and city locations on a line from the Azores to Iceland, where dredging has brought lava to the surface from a depth of 3,000 meters. The volcanic nature of the islands now existing in the Atlantic Ocean corroborates Plato's statement that the Atlantean continent was destroyed by volcanic cataclysms. M. Termier also advocates the conclusions of a young French zoologist, M. Louis Germain, who admitted the existence of an Atlantic continent connected with the Iberian Peninsula and with Mauritania and prolonged toward the south so as to include some regions of desert climate. Dudes, okay, so Mauritania, is that how you say it? Secret Soul, she suggested that I watch that special on Netflix. And what is it called? Something like ancient apocalypses or something like that. And shoot, is that where I saw it? I'm not sure if that's where I saw it. I don't think it was. It was something I watched before. Anyways, I saw a special, and it was this guy that was basically investigating things that go bump in the night, stories that we hear of, like the Bermuda Triangle. And they found in Mauritania basically the rings of Atlantis. And with different technology they have out now, they found actual structures out there in the desert, and these are places that you're not even really allowed to go. Boom. Fascinating. Yeah, it had the rings. There's a structure inside. They have other structures along the outside. Interesting. Ooh, okay. Toward the south, as to include some regions of desert climate. M. Termier concludes his lecture with a graphic picture of the engulfment of that continent. The description of the Atlantean civilization given by Plato to the why do I always struggle with that? Critias. It's Critias, maybe. Critias, Plato's work, may be summarized as follows. In the first ages, the gods divided the earth among themselves, proportioning it according to their respective dignities. Each became the peculiar deity of his own allotment and established therein temples to himself, ordained as priestcraft, and instituted a system of sacrifice. To Poseidon was given the sea, and the island continent of Atlantis. In the midst of the island was a mountain, which was the dwelling place of 3 earthborn primitive human beings, Evenor, his wife, Leucippe, and their only daughter, Cleito. The maiden was very beautiful, and after the sudden death of her parents, she was wooed by Poseidon, who begat by her 5 pairs of male children. 5 twins? Poseidon appointed his continent among these men, and Atlas, the eldest, he made overlord. He made overlord of the other 9. Poseidon further called the country Atlantis, and the surrounding sea the Atlantic, in honor of Atlas. Before the birth of his 10 sons, Poseidon divided the continent and the coastwise seas into concentric zones of land and water, which were as perfect as though turned upon a lathe. That's those circles. You can look at it from Google Earth. Hey, Dustin, welcome in. Awesome. Welcome, Paradox Fossils. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Dino, welcome in. As though turned upon a lathe. 2 zones of land and 3 of water surrounded the central island, which Poseidon caused to be irrigated with 2 springs of water, one warm and the other cold. The descendants of Atlas continued as rulers of Atlantis, and with wise government and industry elevated the country to a position of surpassing dignity. The natural resources of Atlantis were apparently limitless. Precious metals were mined, wild animals domesticated, and perfumes distilled from its fragrant flowers. While enjoying the abundance natural to their semi-tropic location, the Atlanteans employed themselves also in the erection of palaces, temples, and docks. They bridged the zones of sea and later dug a deep canal to connect the outer ocean with the central island. There stood the palaces and temple of Poseidon, which exalted all other structures in magnificence. A network of bridges and canals was created by the Atlanteans to unite the various parts of their kingdom. Plato then describes the white, black, and red stones which they quarried from beneath their continent and used in the construction of public buildings and docks. They circumscribed each of the land zones with a wall, the outer wall being covered with brass, the middle with tin, and the inner, which encompassed the citadel, with orichalch. 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 I never heard of that. The citadel on the center island contained the palaces, temples, and other public buildings. In its center, surrounded by a wall of gold, was a sanctuary dedicated to Cleito and Poseidon. Is that how you say it? Cleito? Cleito? Here, the first 10 princes of the island were born, and here, each year, their descendants brought offerings. Poseidon's own temple, its exterior entirely covered with silver and its pinnacles with gold, also stood within the citadel. The interior of the temple was of ivory, gold, silver, and orichalch. Let's find out what that is and how you say it. Okay. Orichalch. New tab. Where are you, Orichalch? Pinnacles with citadel, ivory, or okay, Orichalch. Lost it again. Yeah, CH, excuse me. A metallic substance resembling gold in color but inferior in value. A mixed metal of the ancients resembling brass. Orichalcum. Orichalc, maybe. Definition and how do you say it? Cool. Oh, cool looking. Orichalcum. Pronunciation. Orichalcum. Orichalcum. Orichalc. Cool. Orichalcum. Orichalc. I like it. It is sort of like a goldy brass looking thing. Okay. Orichalc. Okay, so the interior of the temple was of ivory, gold, silver, and orichalc, even to the pillars and floor. The temple contained a colossal statue of Poseidon standing in a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses. About him, 100 Nereids riding on dolphins. Arranged outside the building were golden statues of the first 10 kings and their wives. The first 10 kings and their wives. There were more, though. There were more. Okay. The Moors. Shoot, there's so many good creation stories to read about. Maybe I'll get to them all one day. Okay, in the groves and gardens were hot and cold springs. There were numerous temples to various deities, places of exercise for men and for beasts, public baths, and a great race course for horses. At various vantage points on the zones were fortifications, and to the great harbor came vessels from every maritime nation. The zones were so thickly populated that the sound of human voices was ever in the air. That part of Atlantis facing the sea was described as lofty and precipitous, but also the central city was a plain sheltered by mountains renowned for their size, number, and beauty. The plain yielded 2 crops each year. In the winter, being watered by rains, and in the summer by immense irrigation canals, which were also used for transportation. The plain was divided into sections, and in times of war, each section supplied its quota of fighting men and chariots. So let's read about this middle picture I showed you. The scheme of the universe according to the Greeks and the Romans. By ascending successively through the fiery sphere of Hades, the spheres of water, earth, and air, and the heavens of the moon, the plane of Mercury is reached. Above Mercury are the planes of Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the latter containing the symbols of the zodiacal constellations. Above the arch of the heavens, Saturn, is the dwelling place of the different powers controlling the universe. The Supreme Council of the Gods is composed of 12 deities, 6 male and 6 female, which correspond to the positive and negative signs of the zodiac. The 6 gods are Jupiter, Vulcan, Apollo, Mars, Neptune, and Mercury. The 6 goddesses are Juno, Ceres, Vesta, Minerva, Venus, and Diana. Jupiter rides his eagle as the symbol of his sovereignty over the world, and Juno is seated upon a peacock, the proper symbol of her haughtiness and glory. Cool. Dude, so cool. Okay. Back to the main script. The 10 governments differed from each other in detail concerning military requirements. Each of the kings of Atlantis had complete control over his own kingdom, but their mutual relationships were governed by a code engraved by the first 10 kings on a column of balls. How do I say that word again? Oracle. Where is it? Orichalc. Okay, so, but their mutual relationships were governed by a code engraved by the first 10 kings on a column of orichalc standing in the temple of Poseidon. At alternate intervals of 5 and 6 years, a pilgrimage was made to this temple that equal honor might be conferred upon both the odd and the even numbers. That's awesome. Here, with appropriate sacrifice, each king renewed his oath of loyalty upon the sacred inscription. Here also the kings donned azure robes and sat in judgment. At daybreak, they wore their sentences upon a golden tablet. Oh, they wrote their sentences upon a golden tablet and deposited them with their robes as memorials. The chief laws of the Atlantean kings were that they should not take up arms against each other, and that they should come to the assistance of any in their number who was attacked. In matters of war and great moment, the final decision was on the hands of the direct descendants of the family of Atlas. No king had the power of life and death over his kinsmen without the assent of a majority of the 10. This is so juicy. Plato concludes his description by declaring that it was his great empire which attacked the Hellenic states. This did not occur, however, until their power and glory had lured the Atlantean kings from the pathway of wisdom and virtue. Filled with false ambition, the rulers of Atlantis determined to conquer the entire world. Zeus, perceiving the wickedness of the Atlanteans, gathered the gods into his holy habitation and addressed them. Here Plato's narrative comes to an abrupt end, for the Critias was never finished. Let's look at how to say that. I come across it a lot. Critias. Is it Critias? I think I've looked it up before. Critias. 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 All right. Hopefully that can stay with me. Critias. Michigander, welcome in. Awesome. Okay, so Critias. Plato concludes his description by declaring that it was this great empire which attacked the Hellenic states. This did not occur, however, until their power and glory had lured the Atlantean kings from the pathway of wisdom and virtue. Filled with false ambition, the rulers of Atlantis determined to conquer the entire world. Zeus, perceiving the wickedness of the Atlanteans, gathered the gods into his holy habitation and addressed them. Here, Plato's narrative comes to an abrupt end, for the Critias was never finished. In the Timaeus is a further description of Atlantis, supposedly given to Solon by an Egyptian priest, and which concludes as follows, quote, "But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of rain all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis is like the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared and was sunk beneath the sea. And that is the reason why the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, because there is such a quantity of shallow mud in the way. And this was caused by the subsidence of the island." Subsidence. Critias. Okay, subsidence. Subsidence. Oh, I get it. Subsidence of the island. I don't need to look that up. Okay. In the introduction to his translation of the Timaeus, Thomas Taylor quotes from a history of Ethiopia written by Marcellus, which contains the following reference to Atlantis. Quote, "For they relate that in their time there were 7 islands in the Atlantic Sea, sacred to Proserpine, 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 sacred to Proserpine, and besides these, 3 others of an immense magnitude, one of which was sacred to Pluto, another to Ammon, and another, which is the middle of these, and is of 1,000 stadia to Neptune." End quote. Crantor, commenting upon Plato, asserted that the Egyptian priests declared the story of Atlantis to be written upon pillars, which were still preserved circa 300 BC. And in parentheses it says, "see beginnings or glimpses of vanished civilizations." Ignatius Donnelly, who gave the subject of Atlantis profound study, believed that horses were first domesticated by the Atlanteans, for which reason they have always been considered peculiarly sacred to Poseidon. See Atlantis. From a careful consideration of Plato's description of Atlantis, it is evident that the story should not be regarded as wholly historical, but rather as both allegorical and historical. Origen, Porphyry, Proclus, Iamblichus, and Syrianus realized that the story concealed a profound philosophical mystery, but they disagreed as to the actual interpretation. Plato's Atlantis symbolizes the threefold nature of both the universe and the human body. The 10 kings of Atlantis are the tetractys, or numbers, which are born as 5 pairs of opposites. Consult Theon of Smyrna for the Pythagorean doctrine of opposites. The numbers 1 to 10 rule every creature, and the numbers, in turn, are under the control of the monad, or one, the eldest among them. Boom. With the trident scepter of Poseidon, these kings held sway over the inhabitants of the 7 small and the 3 great islands comprising Atlantis. Philosophically, the 10 islands symbolize the triune powers of the superior deity and the 7 regents who bow before his eternal throne. If Atlantis be considered as the archetypal sphere, then its immersion signifies the descent of rationale, organized consciousness into the illusionary, impermanent realm of irrational moral ignorance. Both the sinking of Atlantis and the biblical story of the fall of man signify spiritual involution, a prerequisite to conscious evolution. Either the initiated Plato used the Atlantis allegory to achieve 2 widely different ends, or else the accounts preserved by the Egyptian priests were tampered with to perpetuate the secret doctrine. This does not mean to imply that Atlantis is purely mythological, but it overcomes the most serious obstacle to acceptance of the Atlantis theory, namely, the fantastic accounts of its origin, size, and appearance, and date of destruction, 96,000 BC. 96. In the midst of the central island of Atlantis was a lofty mountain which cast a shadow 5,000 stadia in extent, and whose summit touched the sphere of Aether. This is the axle mountain of the world, sacred among many races and symbolic of the human head, which rises out of the 4 elements of the body. This sacred mountain, upon whose summit stood the temple of the gods, gave rise to the stories of Olympus, Meru, and Asgard. The city of the Golden Gates, the capital of Atlantis, is the one now preserved among numerous religions as the city of the gods, or the holy city. Here is the archetype of the New Jerusalem, with its streets paved with gold and its 12 gates shining with precious stones. Quote, "The history of Atlantis," writes Ignatius Donnelly, "is the key of the Greek mythology. There can be no question that the gods of Greece were human beings. The tendency to attach divine attributes to great earthly rulers is one deeply implanted in human nature." End quote. See Atlantis. The same author sustains his views by noting that the deities of the Greek pantheon were not looked upon as creators of the universe, but rather as regents set over it by its more ancient original fabricators. The Garden of Eden, from which humanity was driven by a flaming sword, is perhaps an allusion to the earthly paradise supposedly located west of the Pillars of Hercules and destroyed by volcanic cataclysms. The deluge legend may be traced also to the Atlantean inundation, during which a world was destroyed by water. Was the religious, philosophic, and scientific knowledge possessed by the priestcrafts of antiquity secured from Atlantis, whose submergence obliterated every vestige of its part in the drama of the world progress? Atlantean sun worship has been perpetuated in the ritualism and ceremonialism of both Christianity and pagandom. Both the cross and the serpent were Atlantean emblems of divine wisdom. The divine Atlantean progenitors of the Mayas and Quiches of Central America coexisted within the green and azure radiance of Gucumatz, 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 the plumed serpent. The 6 skyborn sages came into manifestation as centers of light bound together or synthesized by the 7th and chief of their order, the feathered snake. See the Popol Vuh. The title of winged or plumed snake was applied to Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, The Central American Initiate. The center of the Atlantean wisdom religion was presumably a great pyramidal temple standing on the brow of a plateau rising in the midst of the city of the Golden Gates. From here, the initiate priests of the sacred feather went forth, carrying the keys of universal wisdom to the uttermost parts of the earth. The mythologies of many nations contain amounts of gods, or accounts. Let's try again. The mythologies of the many nations contain accounts of gods who came out of the sea. Certain shamans among the American Indians tell of holy men dressed in birds' feathers and wampum who rose out of the blue waters and instructed them in the arts and crafts. Among the legends of the Chaldeans is that of Oannes, Oannes, a partly amphibious creature who came out of the sea and taught the savage peoples along the shore to read and write, till the soil, cultivate herbs for healing, study the stars, establish rational forms of government, and become conversant with the sacred mysteries. Among the Mayas, Quetzalcoatl, the savior god, whom some Christian scholars believe to have been St. Thomas, issued from the waters and, after instructing the people in the essentials of civilization, rode out to sea on a magic raft of serpents to escape the wrath of the fierce god of the fiery mirror, Tezcatlipoca? Tezcatlipoca. Tezcatlipoca. It may not have been that these demigods of a fabulous age, or rather, may it not have been that these demigods of a fabulous age who, Esdras like, came out of the sea were Atlantean priests? All that primitive man remembered of the Atlanteans was the glory of their golden ornaments, the transcendency of their wisdom, and the sanctity of their symbols, the cross and the serpent. That they came in ships was soon forgotten, for untutored minds considered even boats as supernatural. Wherever the Atlanteans proselyted, proselyted, wherever the Atlanteans proselyted, they erected pyramids and temples patterned after the great sanctuary in the city of the Golden Gates. Okay, let's look up that word. Proselyted. Proselyted? A person newly converted to a religious faith or sect. Proselyted. Okay, I thought I said pronunciation. I did. Proselyte. Proselyted. Cool. Okay. Huh. Okay. Wherever the Atlanteans proselyted, they erected pyramids and temples patterned after the great sanctuary in the city of the Golden Gates. Such is the origin of the pyramids of Egypt, Mexico, and Central America. The mounds in Normandy and Britain, as well as those of the American Indians, are remnants of a similar culture. In the midst of the Atlantean program of world colonization and conversation, the cataclysms which sank Atlantis began. The initiate priests of the sacred feather, who promised to come back to their missionary settlements, never returned, and after the lapse of centuries, tradition preserved only a fantastic account of gods who came from a place where the sea now is. H.P. Blavatsky thus sums up the causes which precipitated the Atlantean disaster. Quote, under the evil insinuations of their demon, Thevetat, Thevetat, the Atlantis race became a nation of wicked magicians. In consequence of this, war was declared, the story of which would be too long to narrate. Its substance may be found in the disfigured allegories of the race of Cain, the giants, and that of Noah and his righteous family. The conflict came to an end by the submersion of the Atlantis, which finds its imitation in the stories of the Babylonian and Mosaic flood, the giants and magicians, and all flesh died, and every man. All except Zesuth, it's XI, Zesuthras, and Noah, all except Zesuthras and Noah, who are substantially identical with the great father of the Tlinkithians. What a fun word. In the Popol Vuh, or the sacred book of the Guatemalans, which also tells of his escaping in a large boat, like the Hindu Noah, via Swasvada. See Isis Unveiled. From the Atlanteans, the world has received not only the heritage of arts and crafts, philosophies and sciences, ethics and religions, but also the heritage of hate, strife, and perversion. The Atlanteans investigated the first war, and it has been said that all subsequent wars were fought in a fruitless effort to justify the first one and right the wrong which it caused. Before Atlantis sank, its spiritually illuminated initiates, who realized that their land was doomed because it had departed from the path of light, withdrew from the ill-fated continent, carrying with them the sacred and secret doctrine. These Atlanteans established themselves in Egypt, where they became its first divine rulers. Nearly all the great cosmologic myths forming the foundation of the various sacred books of the world are based upon the Atlantean mystery rituals. This is so good. The myth of the dying god. The myth of Tammuz and Ishtar is one of the earliest examples of the dying god allegory, probably antedating 4000 BC. See Babylonian and Assyria by Lewis Spence. The imperfect condition of the tables upon which the legends are inscribed makes it impossible to secure more than a fragmentary account of the Tammuz rites. Being the esoteric god of the sun, Tammuz did not occupy a position among the first deities venerated by the Babylonians, who, for lack of deeper knowledge, looked upon him as a god of agriculture or a vegetation spirit. Originally, he was described as being one of the guardians of the gates of the underworld. Like many other savior gods, he is referred to as a shepherd or the lord of the shepherd's seat. Tammuz occupies the remarkable position of son and husband of Ishtar, the Babylonian and Assyrian mother goddess. Ishtar, to whom the planet Venus was sacred, was the most widely venerated deity of the Babylonian and Assyrian pantheon. She was probably identical with Ashtaroth, Astarte, and Aphrodite. The story of her descent into the underworld in search, presumably, for the sacred elixir which alone could restore Tammuz to life is the key to the ritual of her mysteries. Tammuz, whose annual festival took place just before the summer solstice, died in midsummer in the ancient month which bore his name, and was mourned with elaborate ceremonies. The manner of his death is unknown, but some of the accusations made against Ishtar by Izdubar, or Nimrod, would indicate that she, indirectly at least, had contributed to his demise. The resurrection of Tammuz was the occasion of great rejoicing, at which time he was hailed as a redeemer of his people. Ooh, this picture is so juicy. The great god Pan. Let me take a sip, and I'm not going to get to that yet. Pearl, welcome. Welcome, everyone. With outspread wings, Ishtar, the daughter of Sin, the moon, sweeps downward to the gates of death. The house of darkness, the dwelling of the god Irkalla, which is Irkalla, is described as the place of no return. It is without light. The nourishment of those who dwell there is in dust, and their food is mud. Over the bolts on the doors of the house of Irkalla is scattered dust, and the keepers of the house are covered with feathers like birds. Ishtar demands that the keepers open the gates, declaring that if they do not, she will shatter the doorposts and strike the hinges and raise up dead devourers of the living. Dead devourers of the living. The guardians of the gates beg her to be patient while they go to the queen of Hades, from whom they secure permission to admit Ishtar, but only in the same manner as all others come to this dreary house. Ishtar thereupon descends through the 7 gates which lead downward into the depths of the underworld. At the first gate, the great crown is removed from her head. At the second gate, the earrings from her ears. At the third gate, the necklace from her neck. At the fourth gate, the ornaments from her breast. At the fifth gate, the girdle from her waist. And at the sixth gate, the bracelets from her hands and feet. And at the seventh gate, the covering cloak of her body. Ishtar remonstrates, remonstrates, remonstrates. Ishtar remonstrates as each successive article of apparel is taken from her. But the guardian tells her that this is the experience of all who enter the somber domain of death. Enraged upon beholding Ishtar, the mistress of Hades inflicts upon her all manner of disease and imprisons her in the underworld. Remonstrates. Let's look it up. Proselyte. Make a forcefully reproachful protest. Wow. Okay. Remonstrate. Make a forcefully reproachful protest. He turned angrily to remonstrate with Tommy. Wow. Okay. Ishtar remonstrates as each successive article of apparel is taken from her. All right. As Ishtar represents the spirit of fertility, her loss prevents the ripening of the crops and the maturing of all life upon the earth. In this respect, the story parallels the legend of Persephone. I was thinking the same thing. The gods, realizing that the loss of Ishtar is disorganizing all nature, sends a messenger to the underworld and demand her release. The mistress of Hades is forced to comply, and the water of life is poured over Ishtar. Thus cured of the infirmaries inflicted on her, she retraces her way upward through the 7 gates, at each of which she is reinvested with the article of apparel which the guardians had removed. See the Chaldean accounts of Genesis. No record exists that Ishtar secured the water of life, which would have wrought the resurrection of Tammuz. The myth of Ishtar symbolizes the descent of the human spirit through the 7 worlds, or spheres, of the sacred planets, until finally, deprived of its spiritual adornments, it incarnates in the physical body, Hades, where the mistress of that body heaps every form of sorrow and misery upon the imprisoned consciousness. The waters of life, the secret doctrine, cure the diseases of ignorance, and the spirit, ascending again to its divine source, regains its God-given adornments as it passes upward through the rings of the planets. Another mystery ritual among the Babylonians and Assyrians was that of Merodach and the dragon. Merodach, the creator of the inferior universe, slays a horrible monster, and out of her body forms the universe. Here is the probable source of the so-called Christian allegory of Saint George and the dragon. The mysteries of Adonis, or Adonai, were celebrated annually in many parts of Egypt, Phoenicia, and Byblos. The name Adonis, or Adonai, means Lord, and was a designation applied to the sun, and later borrowed by the Jews as the exoteric name of their god. Smyrna, mother of Adonis, was turned into a tree by the gods, and after a time, the bark burst open, and the infant Savior issued forth. According to one account, he was liberated by a wild boar, which split the wood of the maternal tree with its tusks. Adonis was born at midnight of the 24th of December, and through his unhappy death and misery rite was established that wrought the salvation of the people. In the Jewish month of Tammuz, another name for this deity, he was gored to death by a wild boar sent by the god Ars, or Mars, ARS. The Adoniasmos was the ceremony of lamenting the premature death of the murdered god. In Ezekiel 7:14, it is written that women were weeping for Tammuz, Adonis, at the north gate of the Lord's house in Jerusalem. Sir James George Fraser cites Jerome thus, quote, "He tells us that Bethlehem, the traditionary birthplace of the Lord, was shaded by a grove of that still older Syrian lord, Adonis, and that where the infant Jesus had wept, the lover of Venus was bewailed." End quote. See the Golden Bough. The effigy of a wild boar is said to have been set over one of the gates of Jerusalem in honor of Adonis, and his rites celebrated in the grotto of the Nativity at Bethlehem. Adonis, as the gored, or god, man, is one of the keys to Sir Francis Bacon's use of the wild boar in his cryptic symbolism. So let's get to this picture here, because we're almost to the end of this page. Hieroglyphical representation of Jupiter or Pan, the great god Pan. Oh, wow. There's all kinds of weird, cool stuff in his body. Okay, and there's like a key, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O. Okay, let's pull up this. Okay, so hieroglyphical representation of Jupiter or Pan. A. Where's A in this picture? I see a pyramid. A is the forehead. A ruddy face, the power of heat in the world. B are the horns. The power of the heavenly rays upon sublunary nature. C. Where's C? Oh, is the chin and the goatee. Masculine elements. D, which is the staff. The power of the periodic return of the year and all of its revolutions. So that's the crook of the staff. E is the length of the staff. Everything is maintained by its virility. F. Where's F? A, B, C, D, E. I see G. I see L. I see I and H. M and N. K. Where's F? Oh, it's this sash across his chest with the stars down it. F. The power of the firmament, or the spheres of the fixed stars. G, which are his thighs. Earth, the feminine element, bristling with plants, seeds, and trees. H, which is right under his belly button. Aquae et liquoris fons, which is elementum femininum. Rigation fecundus terram. I are like right, it's like the knees maybe, like right above the knees. Fields, crops, and various forms of vegetable life. K, it's like something he's holding in his hand. Maybe a lute. The harmonies of the 7 planets. L are the knees. The mountains show rough and uneven places. M, which are the hooves, the power of fecundity. N, which is the platform he stands on, the firm foundation. And then O, I saw you, where are you? Oh, are the wings. The force of the winds and their speed then agitated. From Kirchner's Oedipus Aegypticus. Fascinating. Now let's read the blurb underneath it. Hey, Sass, welcome in. Great to see you. Michelle, yay. So the great god Pan. The great god Pan was celebrated as the author and director of the sacred dances, which he is supposed to have instituted to symbolize the circumambulations of the heavenly bodies. Circumambulations. The rotations? Circumambulations. Circumambulate. Walk all the way around. Circumambulate. Definition. Walk all the way around something. They used to circumambulate the perimeter wall. Cool. Okay. So dances which he is supposed to have instituted to symbolize the circumambulations of the heavenly bodies. Pan was a composite creature, the upper part, with the exception of his thorns, being human, and the lower part in the form of a goat. Pan is the prototype of natural energy and, while undoubtedly a phallic deity, should not be confused with Priapus. The pipes of Pan signify the natural harmony of the spheres, and the god himself is a symbol of Saturn because this planet is enthroned in Capricorn, whose emblem is a goat. The Egyptians were initiated into the mysteries of Pan, who was regarded as a phase of Jupiter, the demiurgus. Pan represented the impregnating power of the sun and was the chief of a horde of rustic deities, pains, fauns, and satyrs. 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 He also signified the controlling spirit of the lower worlds. The Christians fabricated a story to the effect that at the time of the birth of Christ, the oracles were silenced after giving utterance to one last cry. Great Pan is dead. All right, back to the end of this page. Adonis was originally an androgynous deity who represented the solar power, which in the winter was destroyed by the evil principle of cold, the boar. After 3 days, or months, in the tomb, Adonis rose triumphant on the 25th day of March. Amidst the acclamation of his priests and followers, he is risen. Adonis was born out of a myrrh tree. Myrrh, the symbol of death, because of its connection with the process of embalming, was one of the gifts brought by the 3 magi to the manger of Jesus. In the mysteries of Adonis, the neophyte passed through the symbolic death of the god and, raised by the priests, entered into the blessed state of redemption made possible by the suffering of Adonis. Nearly all authors believe Adonis to have been originally the vegetation god directly connected with the growth and maturing flowers and fruits. In support of his viewpoint, they described the gardens of Adonis, which were small baskets of earth in which seeds were planted and nurtured for a period of 8 days. When those plants prematurely died for lack of sufficient earth, they were considered emblematic of the murdered Adonis and were usually cast onto the sea with images of the god. In Phrygia, there existed a remarkable school of religious philosophy which centered around the life and untimely fate of another savior god known as Attis, or Attis, so Atys or Attis, by many considered synonymous with Adonis. This deity was born at midnight on the 24th day of December. Of his death, there are 2 accounts. In one, he was gored to death like Adonis, and in the other, he emasculated himself under a pine tree and there died. His body was taken to a cave by the great mother, Cybele, Cybele, where it remained through the ages without decaying. To the rites of Attis, the modern world is indebted for the symbolism of the Christmas tree. Attis imparted his immortality to the tree beneath which he died, and Cybele took the tree with her when she removed the body. Attis remained 3 days in the tomb, rose upon a date corresponding with Easter morn, and by this resurrection overcame death for all who were initiated into his mysteries. Quote, in the mysteries of the Phrygians, in the mysteries of the Phrygians, says Julian Firmicus, which are called those of the mother of the gods, every year a pine tree is cut down, and in the inside of the tree, the image of a youth is tied in. In the mysteries of Isis, the trunk of a pine tree is cut. The middle of the trunk is nicely hollowed out. The idol of Osiris, made from those hollowed pieces, is buried. In the mysteries of Persephone, a tree cut is put together into the effigy and form of the Virgin, and when it has been carried within the city, it is mourned 40 nights, but the 40th night it is burned. End quote. See Sod, The Mysteries of Adonai. There's little Christmas trees on my shirt right now. Cybele Yay, Genevieve, welcome in. Awesome, thank you. Sybil. Cool. The mysteries of Attis included a sacramental meal during which the neophyte ate out of a drum and drank from a cymbal. After being baptized by the blood of a bull, the new initiate was fed entirely on milk to symbolize that he was still a philosophical infant, having but recently been born out of the sphere of materiality. See Fraser's The Golden Bows. Is there a possible connection between this lacteal diet prescribed by the Attic Rite and St. Paul's allusion to the food of spiritual babies? Sallust gives us a key to the esoteric interpretation of the Attic rites. Sybil, the Great Mother, signifies the vivifying powers of the universe, and Attis, that aspect of the spiritual intellect which is suspended between the divine and animal spheres. The mother of the gods, loving Attis, gave him a starry hat signifying celestial powers, but Attis, or mankind, falling in love with a nymph, symbolic of lower animal propensities, forfeited his divinity and lost his creative power. It is thus evident that Attis represents the human consciousness and that his mysteries are concerned with the reattainment of the starry hat. See Sallust on the gods and the world. I'm seeing Mickey Mouse and all those. Yeah, okay. The rites of Sabazius were very similar to those of Bacchus, and it is generally believed that the two deities are identical. Bacchus was born at Sabazius, or Sabaoth, and these names are frequently assigned to him. The Sabazian mysteries were performed at night, and the ritual included the drawing of a live snake across the breast of the candidate. Clement of Alexandria writes, quote, "The token of the Sabazian mysteries to the initiated is the deity gliding over the beast," end quote. A golden serpent was the symbol of Sabazius because this deity represented the annual renovation of the world by the solar power. The Jews borrowed the name Sabaoth from these mysteries and adopted it as one of the appellations of their supreme god. During the time the Sabazian mysteries were celebrated in Rome, the cult gained many votaries and later influenced the symbolism of Christianity. The Sabiric mysteries of Samothrace were renowned among the ancients, being next to the Eleusinian in the public esteem. Herodotus declares that the Samothracians received their doctrines, especially those concerning Mercury, from the Pelasgians. Little is known concerning the Sabiric rituals, which is Cabiric, for they were enshrouded in the profoundest secrecy. Some regard the Kabiri or Sabiri as 7 in number and refer to them as the 7 spirits of fire before the throne of Saturn. Others believe the Kabiri to be the 7 sacred wanderers, later called the planets, the wandering stars. I made a poster. It says wandering stars. Anyways, that's what I looked at. While a vast number of deities are associated with the Samothracian mysteries, the ritualistic drama centers around 4 brothers. The first 3, Aeschylus, Aciochorus, and Aciochersa. So it's Ascarios, Aciochorus, Aciochersus, and Aciochersa attack the murder attack and murder the fourth, Kashmala, or Cadmillus. Dionysidorus, however, identifies Ascarios with Demeter, Achiochersis with Pluto, and Achiochersa with Persephone. I apologize if I'm just butchering this. With Persephone, and Kashmala with Hermes. Alexander Wilder notes that in the Samothracian ritual, quote, Cadmillus is made to include the Theban serpent god, Cadmus, and Thoth of Egypt, the Hermes of the Greeks, and the Emif, or Aesculapius, and the Emeth, or Aesculapius of the Alexandrians and Phoenicians, end quote. Here again is a repetition of the story of Osiris, Bacchus, Adonis, Balder, and Hierophant. The worship of Attis and Cybele was also involved in the Samothracian mysteries. In the rituals of the Sabiri, or Kabiri, is to be traced a form of pine tree worship. For this tree, sacred to Attis, was first trimmed into the form of a cross and then cut down in honor of the murdered god whose body was discovered at its foot. Quote, if you wish to inspect the origins, if you wish to inspect the orgies of the Corybantes, writes Clement, then know that, having killed their third brother, they covered the head of the dead body with a purple cloth, crowned it, and carrying it on the point of a spear, buried it under the roots of Olympus. These mysteries are, in short, murders and funerals. This ante-Nicene father, in his efforts to defame the pagan rites, apparently ignores the fact that, like the Siberian martyr, Jesus Christ was foully betrayed, tortured, and finally murdered. And the priests of these rites, who are called kings of the sacred rites by those whose business it is to name them, gave additional strangeness to the tragic occurrence. By forbidding parsley with the roots from being placed on the table, for they think that parsley grew from the corybantic blood that flowed forth, just as the women, in celebrating Thesmorphia, abstain from eating the seeds of the pomegranate which have fallen on the ground, form the idea that pomegranates sprang from the depths of the blood of Dionysus. Those corybantes, which is Corybanthes, also form the drops of the blood of Dionysus. Those corybantes, those corybantes also they call Qabbalic, and the ceremony itself they announce as the Qabbalic mystery, end quote. The mysteries of the Kabiri were divided into 3 degrees, the first of which celebrated the death of Kashmala at the hands of his 3 brothers, the second, the discovery of his mutilated body, the parts of which had been found and gathered after much labor, and the third, accompanied by great rejoicing and happiness, his resurrection and the consequent salvation of the world. And the consequent salvation of the world. The temple of the Kabiri at Samothrace contained a number of curious divinities, many of them misshapen creatures, representing the elemental powers of nature, possibly the Bacchic Titans. Children were initiated into the Kabirian cult with the same dignity as adults, and Samothracian rites were particularly concerned with navigation, the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux, or the gods of navigation, Gemini, being among those propitiated by members of that cult. The Argonautic expedition, listening to the advice of Orpheus, stopped at the island of Samothrace for the purpose of having its members initiated into the Qabbalic rites. Herodotus relates that when Cambyses entered the temple of the Qabbiri, he was unable to restrain his mirth at seeing before him the figure of a man standing upright, and facing the man, the figure of a woman standing on her head. Had Cambyses been acquainted with the principles of divine astronomy, he would have realized that he was then in the presence of the key to universal equilibrium. Quote, "I ask," says Voltaire, "who wrote these hierophants, these sacred Freemasons, who celebrated their ancient mysteries of Samothracia, and whence came they and their gods Qabbiri?" End quote. See Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Clement speaks of the mysteries of the Qabbiri as, quote, "the sacred mysteries of a border slain." Of a brother. "The sacred mysteries of a brother slain by his brethren." And the Qabbiric death was one of the secret symbols of antiquity. That was the end of the quote, a little up actually. Thus, the allegory of the self murdered by the not self is perpetuated through the religious mysticism of all peoples. The philosophic death and the philosophic resurrection are the lesser and the greater mysteries respectively. Two more paragraphs to this this section. A curious aspect of the dying god myth is that of the hanged man. The most important example of this peculiar conception is found in the Odinic rituals, where Odin hangs himself for 9 nights from the branches of the world tree, and upon the same occasion also pierces his own side with the sacred spear. As a result of this great sacrifice, Odin, while suspended over the depths of Niflheim, discovered by meditation the runes or alphabets by which later the records of his people were preserved. Because of this remarkable experience, Odin is sometimes shown seated on a gallows tree, and he became the patron deity of all who died by the noose. Esoterically, the hanged man is the human spirit, which is suspended from heaven by a single thread. Wisdom, not death, is the reward for this voluntary sacrifice, during which the human soul, suspended above the world of illusion and meditating upon its unreality, is rewarded by the achievement of self-realization. From a consideration of all these ancient and secret rituals, it becomes evident that the mystery of the dying god was universal among the illuminated and venerated colleges of the sacred teaching. This mystery has been perpetuated in Christianity and the crucifixion and death of the God-man, Jesus the Christ. The secret import of this world tragedy and the universal martyr must be rediscovered if Christianity is to reach the heights attained by the pagans in the days of their philosophic supremacy. The myth of the dying god is the key to both universal and individual redemption and regeneration. To those who do not comprehend the true nature of the supreme allegory, are not privileged to consider themselves either wise or truly religious. Boom! And that was that. So next time we go live with this, hopefully next week, we're getting into 37, page 37, the life and writings of Thoth Hermes Trismegistus. Ooh, Hermes standing upon the back of Typhon. I'll give you a little brief glimpse here of this cool picture. Caduceus, fire breathing. Ooh. Plus, I mean, are those fans? Or, I mean, they're triangles, but they're pyramids. He's happy. Or it's kind of, well, he looked happier when I was looking at the screen. Oh, the tablet, the emerald tablet, the pyramids, a stork. Wow, his shoes are like cool. They like curl up in. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me, you guys. And we'll see when I go live next. But I'll make sure that I get a notification out at least a half an hour beforehand. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone here. Thank you, Manly P. Hall, and everyone who went into the making of this tome. Thank you, YouTube. And thank you, StreamYard. I love yous. And I wish you wonderful weekends. And I'll see you next time. Mwah. Do it like you feel it. Thank you so much.